I want you to try something for a second. Um, Wherever you are right now, whether you're driving or, I don't know, doing the dishes, just sitting there, I want you to bring your attention to your brain.
Hmm.
Just think about the actual physical organ inside your skull. Because usually when we do this, we picture like the standard high school biology textbook illustration.
Right. The gray matter.
Exactly. That gray, squishy, walnut-looking thing, just a biological calculator made of meat. But I want you to throw that image out the window, just completely erase it.
I like where this is going.
Right. Instead, I want you to imagine your brain as a literal, glowing, fiber optic cosmic antenna.
It's a really striking visual, and it fundamentally reorients how we think about our own existence, honestly.
It really does. I mean, I spent all weekend just buried in the materials for today's deep dive, and my entire perspective completely shifted. Like, picture an instrument that is actively generating physical light. An instrument that can sense invisible magnetic fields in the air, and one that is physically inextricably connected to the universe around it.
Which means, we have to stop thinking of ourselves as these isolated islands of thought wandering around in a vacuum. If the texts we're exploring today are accurate, we're active nodes in a much larger, incredibly dynamic, energetic network.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We have a massive stack of sources on the table, and honestly, on the surface, they seem completely unrelated. Like, it gave me whiplash at first.
I can imagine. It is quite the juxtaposition.
Right. So on one side of the desk, we have this deeply ambitious philosophical and, well, scientific codex. It's called The Echoes of the Prism of the Odysseys, along with associated texts like Cosmos Singulier by Alan Imbert. And this work is wild.
It really is.
It basically attempts to reimagine human biophysics. It takes hard, measurable science and bridges it with profound philosophical phenomenology. It basically turns biology into astrophysics.
And then, sitting right next to that highly theoretical codex, we have a starkly contrasting real-world source.
Yeah.
It's a formal, highly structured legal document. Specifically, it's a human rights case regarding a French national who was detained in a facility in Serbia in 2025.
It's incredibly heavy, but as I read through both of them, I realized that they're talking about the exact same thing from two totally different extremes.
Exactly.
The Codex builds this incredible theory of the human brain as an instrument of, like, transcosmic connection. It shows us how delicate and magnificent the human biomachine is. And then the legal case shows us in just agonizing detail what happens when that exact same delicate instrument is thrown into an absolute nightmare. It shows us the physical imprint of trauma.
And that contrast is really what makes the analysis so powerful today. I mean, the Codex doesn't just ask what the brain is. It asks how the brain's physical reality dictates our connection to reality itself.
Right.
And then the legal document shows us what happens when that reality is systematically dismantled.
Exactly. So as we go through this, we are going to explore both sides of that coin. And as I was going through the Codex, I actually kept a running list in my notebook of these absolute mind-bending takeaways.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, things that just made me stop reading and stare at the wall for a minute. I've got about 10 of them that I want to make sure we cover today because, and I mean this, they will fundamentally change how you view your own physical body.
I think starting with the theoretical architecture is probably the best approach here. The central thesis of Alan Imbert's Codex is that the human mind isn't just a single processor doing a single job. It possesses what he calls a triple nature.
Okay, let's break that down. What does a triple nature actually look like in practice?
So the text defines the brain as acting in three simultaneous capacities. First, it is a receiving antenna. It's constantly picking up environmental, electromagnetic, and cosmic frequencies.
Okay.
It's always listening, even when you aren't consciously aware of it.
Like a radio left on in the background.
Precisely. Second, it's an emitting signal. It is actively projecting our internal states out into the world. So our stress, our calm, our focus, it's pushing that outward into the environment.
And the third?
The third is perhaps the most complex. The text describes the brain as an informational substrate.
Okay, you're going to have to help me with that one because informational substrate sounds like a fancy Silicon Valley term for a hard drive.
Right, yeah.
But in the context of this cosmic codex, it has to mean more than just a biological USB stick.
It does. I mean, think of a substrate in chemistry or biology. It's the surface or the medium on which an organism lives or grows or reacts.
Okay.
The Codex suggests that a highly trained, precise human brain doesn't just store information about the cosmos, it actually merges with the cosmos.
Yeah.
It becomes part of the very fabric through which information propagates across physical and temporal boundaries.
Wow.
Yeah, so you aren't just holding the data. Your conscious structure becomes the medium for the data itself.
Right. That is heavy. But before we get totally lost in the cosmic fabric, I want to pull this back to the physical reality of the body, because this is where I hit the first major takeaway in my notes, my first fun fact.
Let's hear it.
We hear cosmic antenna, and we immediately think it's just a poetic metaphor. But the Codex grounds this in deep physical reality. Your brain, physically, generates 15 to 20 watts of electrical power.
Yes, that is the baseline metabolic demand of the human brain.
That is the equivalent of a modern LED light bulb. I mean, think about that. You, listening to this right now, have enough electrical current running around inside your skull to literally power a desk lamp.
It's a brilliant way to conceptualize the sheer thermodynamic cost of cognition. I mean, the brain only accounts for about 2% of your total body weight,
Right.
but it consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy budget.
So where is all that power actually going? If I'm just sitting on the couch, scrolling on my phone, why is my brain burning 20 watts?
Well, a huge portion of it is dedicated to something called the sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump. Every single neuron in your brain, and you have roughly 86 billion of them, maintains an electrical charge across its outer membrane. It's constantly pumping charged ions in and out to maintain a readiness to fire.
Oh, I see.
It's like constantly pulling back the string of 86 billion tiny bows, just waiting to release the arrow. Maintaining that tension, that electrical potential, requires a massive amount of ATP, which is the cellular energy currency.
So there is a literal physical electrical grid inside my head constantly buzzing.
Yes, and the fundamental law of physics here is that wherever there's electricity, there is electromagnetism. You cannot have moving electrical charges without generating a magnetic field.
And where there is electromagnetism, there is light. Which brings me to the second massive realization from the text, fun fact number 2. The brain isn't just a dark, wet electrical network. The text highlights that the brain actually emits light.
Yes.
Not metaphorically, actual literal photons of light.
Yeah, the phenomenon is known in biophysics as ultra-weak photon emissions, or biophotons.
But how does meat I know how a firefly does it, but how do my brain cells do it?
It really comes down to oxidative metabolism.
Yeah.
Essentially, the way our cells burn fuel, glucose and oxygen, to create that ATP energy we just talked about, this process isn't perfectly clean.
Okay.
It creates byproducts called reactive oxygen species. When these highly reactive molecules interact with lipids and proteins in the cell, it excites their electrons.
Right.
And when those electrons drop back down to their normal resting state, they release that extra energy as a photon, a particle of light.
And the Codex actually gives the exact spectrum for this light, right?
There it does. It operates in the 300 to 800 nanometer range.
So for those of us who haven't memorized the electromagnetic spectrum since high school, what does that actually look like?
It spans from near ultraviolet, completely through the visible light spectrum that human eyes can see, all the way into near infrared.
That is just wild. So we have a 15-watt power source generating electrical fields and emitting actual light across the visible and invisible spectrum. And here is the part of the text that really blew my mind. The Codex says the myelinated axons act as biological fiber optics to channel this light.
We need to unpack that because it's a really profound structural claim.
Yeah, please do.
So neurons have these long tails called axons, which is how they send electrical signals to other neurons. These axons are wrapped in a fatty substance called myelin.
Right, which acts like insulation on a copper wire.
Correct. But the Codex, leaning into advanced biophysics, posits that the myelin sheath doesn't just insulate electricity, it actually acts as a waveguide for these biophotons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just like a glass fiber optic cable traps light and bounces it down the line to transmit data across the ocean, the myelin traps these biophotons and channels them through the brain.
So you're saying I have an internet fiber optic cable network running parallel to the electrical grid in my head?
Basically, yes. The text suggests a secondary quantum-level communication network operating at the speed of light within the brain itself. It's coordinating vast regions of neural tissue far faster than chemical or electrical signals alone could ever achieve.
Okay, here's where it gets really speculative, and I know we need to be careful here. The third major takeaway from my notes, fun fact 3, involves what the Codex calls tachyonic energy.
Yes.
The text theorizes that if this glowing fiber optic brain is highly trained and highly intentional, it becomes the substrate for transcosmic information, and it actually flirts with the idea of tachyon energy.
Yes, and we must tread very carefully here, because the author of the Codex, Alan Imbert, explicitly notes this is a speculative hypothesis.
Mhm.
He's stepping out of established, measurable biophysics and into theoretical physics.
Just so we're all on the same page, tachyons are theoretical particles that travel faster than the speed of light, right?
That is the definition, yes.
Wow.
In standard relativistic physics, Einstein's realm, nothing with mass can accelerate to the speed of light, let alone exceed it.
Right, because it would require infinite energy.
Exactly. However, equations in special relativity don't technically forbid particles that always move faster than light and can never slow down to it. These are tachyons.
Okay.
They are a mathematical possibility within certain frameworks, but I really must stress they have never been experimentally observed or confirmed by modern science.
So why does the Codex even bring them up if they might not exist?
Well, the text uses the concept of tachyonic energy to illustrate a philosophical and systemic extreme. It asks the question, if the human consciousness is this perfectly tuned, light-emitting bioelectromagnetic antenna, could it reach a state of resonance where it propagates information outside the standard bounds of spacetime?
I see.
The author uses tachyons as a conceptual placeholder for transtemporal intuition or instant cosmic connection. But the text rigorously distinguishes this philosophical speculation from the established biophysics like the EEG readings and biophoton emission.
Okay, I have to push back a little bit here because I was sitting on my couch reading this and I had this exact thought. If my brain has the wattage of a light bulb, and it's literally channeling near ultraviolet light through biological fiber optics and possibly flirting with theoretical faster-than-light transcosmic energy,
Yeah.
why don't I feel like a superhero? I mean, why do I just feel like a regular person trying to remember if I took the chicken out of the freezer? Why don't I feel like I'm glowing?
That's the most natural question to ask, right?
Hmm.
If we are this powerful, why is our subjective experience so mundane? And the answer lies in something called sensory filtering or sensory gating. The Codex actually addresses this beautifully.
How does it explain it?
Well, think about the sheer volume of data we just discussed. If
Wow.
your conscious mind, the part of you listening to this sentence, were actively aware of every microfluctuation in your biophotonic network, every magnetic field passing through your living room, and every electrical impulse of your 15 watts of brain power,
Yeah.
you would be entirely paralyzed.
It would be like trying to drink from a fire hose of cosmic data.
Worse, it would be biological white noise, just total saturation. So evolution provided us with aggressive bouncers at the door of our perception. You have structures in the brain like the thalamus, which acts as a relay station, and larger systemic networks like the default mode network. Their entire job is to compress reality.
So my brain is actively hiding its own superpowers from me.
Essentially, yes.
Yes.
It filters out the vast majority of this cosmic and biophysical data so you can focus on immediate survival, social interaction, and yes, remembering to thaw the chicken.
Wow.
The mundane experience of reality is a highly curated, heavily compressed illusion designed to keep you functional. The glowing antenna is running the operating system in the background, but your conscious mind is only given access to a very restricted user interface.
Okay, so if we are filtering out 99% of reality just to survive, how does the Codex say we actually tune this antenna? How do we process the world within this restricted user interface?
The text maps this out systematically through what it calls the 5 simultaneous visions of the brain. It is an architecture of how the brain modulates its frequencies to interact with the world.
Right, the 5 visions, I have them written down here. 1, the alchemy of thoughts. 2, feedback loops. 3, cognitive expansions. 4, the decree of continuity of existence. And 5, down-to-earth practice. Honestly, when I first read those, they sounded a bit mystical, like chapters in a self-help book. But the text grounds these in hard electromagnetic signatures, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and this is where the Codex excels. It doesn't leave these as vague philosophical concepts. It ties every state of consciousness, every vision, to a specific measurable frequency of brainwave activity.
Measured in hertz.
Yes, hertz, cycles per second. When millions of neurons fire together in the brain, they create an electrical wave that can be measured on the scalp using an EEG, an electroencephalogram.
Let's break those frequencies down, because understanding these waves really helped me grasp how the antenna shifts its tuning.
Sure. So at the absolute lowest end of the spectrum, we have delta waves. These oscillate between 0.5 and 4 hertz. So very slow, very deep waves.
And what is the brain doing in delta?
This is deep, dreamless sleep. The codex describes it as deep survival rest and molecular restoration.
Okay.
From a biological standpoint, this is when the brain's glymphatic system opens up and literally washes toxic proteins out of the neural tissue. The antenna has pulled its focus away from the external cosmos and turned entirely inward to focus on physical repair.
Got it. Okay, then we move up the dial slightly to theta, which is 4 to 8 hertz.
Theta is fascinating. It's the gateway to memory and the subconscious. It's that twilight state you experience right as you are falling asleep or just waking up.
Oh, that state where your thoughts stop making logical sense and start becoming really dreamlike.
Precisely. The text notes that deep transient resonances occur here. In neuroscience, we know theta is heavily involved in the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory center. It is where we index and consolidate our experiences.
Next up is alpha, which is 8 to 12 hertz.
Alpha is a state of calm receptivity. Imagine you are awake, you are sitting comfortably, and you close your eyes. Your brain instantly produces a surge of alpha waves.
So the bouncer at the door is relaxed.
Exactly. Your system is filtering the environment to preserve integrity, but it is not actively stressing or calculating. It is a state of relaxed readiness. It's the baseline hum of a well-regulated antenna.
Then we get to beta, 12 to 30 hertz, which, if I had to guess, is where you and I are operating right now.
Almost certainly, yeah. Beta is active analysis, concentration, and engagement with the external network.
Okay.
When you are calculating a tip at a restaurant or arguing a point or actively listening to a complex explanation, your brain is firing in beta. It's high energy, but it can also be associated with stress and anxiety if sustained for too long without dipping back into alpha or theta.
And finally, the highest standard range discussed in the text, gamma, at 40 hertz and above, sometimes way above.
Gamma is the holy grail in cognitive neuroscience. For a long time, researchers didn't even know what to make of it. It's associated with high-resolution cognitive integration.
What does that mean practically, like day to day?
Well, in neuroscience, there's something called the binding problem. How does the brain take the visual shape of a dog, the sound of a bark, and the emotional memory of a pet, and bind them all together into a single unified conscious experience of dog in milliseconds?
Right.
The leading theory is that gamma waves synchronize disparate areas of the brain to bind that information together.
So gamma is the ultimate unifier.
Yes. The codex associates gamma with moments of sudden insight, deep meditation, or illumination. It is the antenna operating at its absolute peak frequency, integrating massive amounts of data into a coherent vision.
Okay, so our brain is humming along these different frequencies, shifting gears between delta sleep and gamma insight. But as I was reading, I realized the brain isn't the only intent in the body, which leads me to my fourth major takeaway, fun fact 4, the heart's magnetic field.
Oh, yeah.
The text states that the brain's magnetic field is incredibly delicate, right?
It is vanishingly delicate. We measure the magnetic field of the brain in femtoteslas.
A femtotesla. I had to look this up. That is 1/4,000,000th of a Tesla.
To put that in perspective, the Earth's natural magnetic field, the one that moves a compass needle, is about 50 microteslas. So the brain's magnetic field is roughly 50 million times weaker than the Earth's magnetic field.
So how do we even know it's there? I mean, how do you measure something that weak?
It requires monumental effort. Scientists use devices called SQUI sensors,
I love that acronym. What does it stand for?
superconducting quantum interference device. They are incredibly complex sensors bathed in liquid helium to make them superconducting.
Wow.
And they have to be placed inside heavily shielded rooms made of special metal alloys just to block out the Earth's magnetic field and the electromagnetic noise of local power lines. Only then can you detect the femtotesla whispers of the brain's magnetic field.
Okay, so the brain is this hyper-delicate, whispered magnetic field. But the heart, the text says the human heart generates a magnetic field 100 to 1,000 times stronger than the brain.
Yes. The heart's magnetic field is measured in picoteslas. It is vastly more powerful.
Why is the heart so much louder magnetically than the brain?
Because of the sheer density and synchronized firing of the cardiac muscle. The heart is a massive electromagnetic generator, pushing charged blood, which is full of iron and electrolytes, through the body.
And the text says this field can be detected several meters away from the body.
It can. Standard magnetometers can pick up the heart's field up to 3 feet away, and highly sensitive equipment can detect it even further. It is a profound biophysical reality that completely changes how we view human interaction.
It really does. When we talk about the vibe someone brings into a room, we aren't just using poetry. If someone walks in highly stressed, their heart rate is erratic, their electromagnetic field changes.
And your own highly tuned bioantenna, your nervous system, detects that shift in the ambient magnetic field of the room.
Which perfectly sets up my fifth major takeaway, fun fact 5, the egregore. Now, I have to be honest, usually when you hear the word egregore, it sounds like something out of an occult fantasy novel.
It does have that reputation.
Right. The traditional definition is an autonomous magical entity created by the collective thoughts of a group. But the Codex redefines it entirely, stripping away the magic and replacing it with biophysics.
Exactly. The text refuses to rely on mysticism. It defines an egregore as an architecture of symbolic coherence governed by strict biophysical laws. It is the literal physical synchronization of collective attention.
So how does a magical entity become a biophysical mechanism? I mean, how does that actually work in the real world?
Think about a group of people focusing deeply together. It could be a highly engaged boardroom meeting, an audience captivated by a moving symphony, or a congregation in shared prayer.
Okay.
When collective attention is funneled into a single focal point, the individual brain activities of those people begin to synchronize. Their EEG readings actually start to align.
So they start operating on the same frequency.
Yes. And the text notes a fascinating detail. In moments of profound shared baseline connection, this group frequency can anchor to 7.83 hertz.
7.83 hertz, that is a very specific number. That's the Schumann resonance, right?
It is. The Schumann resonance is often called the heartbeat of the Earth.
I always hear that phrase, but what is it physically? How does the Earth have a heartbeat?
It has to do with lightning.
Lightning.
Yeah.
Okay.
At any given moment, there are roughly 2,000 thunderstorms rolling across the planet, producing about 50 lightning strikes every second.
Wow, okay.
This constant electrical discharge creates electromagnetic waves that bounce between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere, which is a layer of charged particles high in the atmosphere. This space acts like a massive resonant cavity, and the fundamental standing wave created in this cavity vibrates at precisely 7.83 hertz.
So the Earth itself is humming at 7.83 hertz. And the Codex posits that when a human group synchronizes deeply enough, their collective brainwaves can lock onto this planetary frequency.
Precisely. They cease to be isolated systems. They plug into the environmental baseline. It is the ultimate state of bioelectromagnetic grounding.
And the text suggests this state of what it calls conference actually has physical health benefits.
It does. It suggests that this deep synchronization physically optimizes the clearance of collective cortisol.
Cortisol being the primary stress hormone.
Yes. When you are in a chaotic, unsynchronized environment, your body perceives threat, and cortisol levels spike, initiating a fight-or-flight response.
Right.
But when a group achieves this 7.83 hertz egregore state, the collective nervous system signals safety. The impedance drops, and the bodies can efficiently metabolize and clear that stress hormone.
So to the listener, I want you to really think about this. Think about a time you walked into a room and you immediately felt the vibe. Maybe you walked into an office and the air felt thick with tension, almost suffocating. Or, conversely, you walked into a gathering of close friends and everyone was completely in sync, relaxed, and laughing. The Codex is telling us that you weren't imagining that feeling. That is literally your bioantenna, your brain and your heart, picking up the collective bioelectromagnetic standing waves of the people in that room. You are physically sensing their synchronized frequencies.
It validates that deeply subjective human feeling with an objective, measurable mechanism. You aren't imagining the tension. Your sensory apparatus is decoding the electromagnetic reality of the space before your conscious mind even has time to process the facial expressions of the people in the room.
That is incredible, but it also makes me wonder if we all have these biological antennas and we are all swimming in this sea of electromagnetism and biophotons, are some antennas tuned differently than others?
That is a crucial part of the Codex, and it represents a major paradigm shift in how we view psychology. The text extensively explores neurodivergence, but it refuses to classify it as a defect. Instead, it frames it as a distinct bioelectromagnetic interface.
This was section 3 of my deep dive, and it fundamentally changed how I view neurodiversity. The Codex looks at neurodivergent profiles, specifically TSA, which is the French acronym referring to the autism spectrum, as well as bipolar and schizophrenia, and it redefines them.
Yes.
It says these aren't merely pathologies or broken systems, they are systems with altered synaptic resistance and hyperacuity.
To understand this, we have to look at the standard medical model.
Yeah.
Traditionally, psychiatry often views these conditions purely as chemical imbalances, behavioral deficits, or structural abnormalities. The Codex reframes them through the lens of physics. It views them as nervous systems operating with different electromagnetic impedances.
Let's define impedance for a second because we've used that word a few times. If I explain it like plumbing,
Yeah.
if I have a garden hose and I step on it, I am increasing the resistance, or the impedance. The water struggles to flow. If I take my foot off, the impedance drops and the water flows freely.
That is a perfect, explain like I'm five analogy.
Yeah.
In an electrical circuit, impedance is the measure of opposition that a circuit presents to a current when a voltage is applied.
Right.
In the context of the brain, the codex suggests that neurotypical brains have a relatively high baseline impedance to environmental stimuli. The thalamus, that bouncer at the door, is stepping heavily on the garden hose, allowing only a trickle of reality to get through so the person isn't overwhelmed.
But for a neurodivergent profile, like someone on the autism spectrum,
The synaptic resistance is altered, the impedance is drastically lowered, the foot is taken off the hose. Their system does not filter out environmental noise, magnetic fluctuations, or sensory data the way a neurotypical brain does.
Okay.
It captures everything. It is a high-gain, unshielded antenna.
which brings me to the sixth major takeaway in my notes, fun fact 6, and this anecdote truly blew my mind. I actually had to reread the page 3 times. I call it Sensing the Dark.
Oh, this is a fascinating part.
The text shares an observation about a highly sensitive TSA profile who can physically sense an electrical light bulb failing before it visibly goes out.
On the surface, that sounds like precognition or magic. But the codex immediately explains the underlying physics of the event.
Right. I mean, how does someone predict a light bulb dying?
They aren't predicting the future. We have to look at the physics of a failing bulb, especially older fluorescent or gas discharge lamps.
Okay.
Milliseconds before the filament finally breaks or the gas fails to ignite and the light visibly extinguishes, there is a chaotic micro-variation in the electrical frequency feeding the bulb and a minute drop in voltage.
So the electrical grid hiccups right before it dies?
Yes. Now, a standard neurotypical nervous system completely ignores this data. That tiny electromagnetic fluctuation is caught by the sensory organs. But the brain's filters immediately discard it as irrelevant noise. The bouncer throws the data out before you ever consciously perceive it.
But the hypervigilant TSA system, the one with low impedance,
It doesn't filter it. Their bioelectromagnetic interface is operating with such high gain that it processes that microdrop in the ambient electromagnetic field. They process the electrical death of the bulb milliseconds before their visual cortex registers the lack of photons. Their sensory processing is simply vastly faster and less heavily filtered than conscious visual perception.
Wait, they literally feel the electricity dying before the room goes dark? That is undeniably a superpower.
It is.
But when I thought about it for more than a second, I realized how incredibly exhausting it must be to live with an antenna that captures everything.
It is profoundly exhausting, which is why the Codex emphasizes the critical need for specific, controlled environments and protective protocols for these hypertuned systems. Think back to the ATP energy demand we discussed earlier.
The 20 watts?
Right. If a neurotypical brain burns 20 watts just maintaining baseline filtering, a hypertuned brain without those filters is expending massive amounts of cellular energy just dealing with the raw, unfiltered data of reality. This leads to rapid ATP depletion, systemic fatigue, and what we commonly observe as sensory overload or burnout.
They're burning out their molecular turbines just trying to exist in a grocery store.
Exactly.
Speaking of the environment, my 7th takeaway, fun fact 7, deals with how our physical surroundings actually change our antenna's ability to receive signals. Specifically, the Codex talks about water and humidity.
Well, the brain is roughly 77% water, and the Codex relies heavily on the emerging physics of water, specifically referencing the work on the fourth phase of water popularized by researchers like Gerald Pollack.
I've heard of this. It suggests that water in our cells isn't just a passive liquid sloshing around.
Exactly. Standard science taught us about solid, liquid, and gas. Pollack's research posits a fourth phase, an exclusion zone, or EZ water, which structures itself in a crystalline lattice against biological surfaces. The Codex takes this concept and suggests that the water inside and surrounding our biological antenna is an active informational medium.
And the text introduces a highly specific variable called humidiance. It states that the effectiveness of our bioresonance, our ability to connect to the environment, actually changes based on the literal humidity of the air around us.
It provides a very specific thermodynamic metric. It posits that at 70% environmental humidity, The informational transfer through hydrogen bonds in certain matrices is 50% faster than it is at 30% humidity.
Wait, really? A 50% difference? Why does humidity make such a massive mechanical difference?
Think about the physical structure of the air. In a dry environment, at 30% humidity, there are fewer water molecules in the air. The biological environmental structure is rigid. If your body emits a bioelectromagnetic signal or a biophoton, it encounters high impedance in the dry air. It struggles to transmit.
Like trying to swim through a ball pit instead of a pool.
That's a really good analogy. But in a highly humid environment, say 70%, the air is saturated with water molecules. Water is highly conductive due to its hydrogen bonds.
Right.
The air itself becomes a highly efficient conductive informational medium. The hydrogen bonds between the water molecules can auto-organize rapidly, creating temporary structural pathways that allow the electromagnetic and biophotonic signals to travel with much greater efficiency and less resistance.
So on a literal physical level, a humid day changes the physics of how your brain connects to the world around you.
According to the Codex, yes.
Okay.
It turns subjective human feelings about the weather, like feeling foggy on a dry day or feeling deeply connected and sensory-rich in a humid forest, into a strict thermodynamic operator of consciousness.
Okay, we've talked about the internal antenna, the frequencies, the sensory filtering, and the environmental humidity. Now I want to talk about the geometry of how people actually connect with each other. Because the text doesn't just stay in the abstract realm of biophysics, it provides a fascinating, highly specific case study of three human beings interacting.
Yes, Section 4 of the Codex. It describes three individuals, Linda, Jimmy, and Alan, forming what it explicitly calls an oscillating circuit of consciousness.
When I read this, it felt like reading a manual for building a human radio transmitter. Let's break down their specific biophysical roles, because I think everyone listening will recognize these archetypes in their own friend groups or families.
Very likely, yeah.
The text assigns them very specific functions based on their biology and their psychological profiles. Let's start with Linda.
Linda is described in the text as having a high-frequency profile. She is physically petite, highly sensitive, and the text notes specific biological markers like a bipolar profile and lactose intolerance.
Why does lactose intolerance matter in a cosmic biophysics text? Like, that seems so random.
Because it highlights a biological system that is inherently reactive, a system that possesses low physical and digestive tolerance for complex, slow-metabolizing compounds. In the geometry of the group, Linda acts as the capture fluid, or the high-gain antenna.
So she is the canary in the coal mine. She's the one picking up the weak signals instantly. The text mentions she reacts to environmental shifts with an immediate physiological before anyone else consciously registers a change.
Precisely. She provides the speed of reaction and the raw, unfiltered receptivity to the network. She brings the data in. But as we discussed with hypertuned systems, a high-gain antenna without proper grounding will quickly fry the circuit. She would burn out.
Right.
That is where the second figure, Jimmy, comes in.
Jimmy is the complete opposite. He is the low-frequency, stable, physically strong, measured.
In electrical terms, Jimmy acts as the earth anchor, or the capacitor. He possesses high energetic inertia. When Linda pulls in massive amounts of chaotic, high-frequency data, Jimmy absorbs the electrical overloads and stabilizes the signals.
Okay, I see.
Without Jimmy, Linda's high frequencies would lead to systemic chaos or saturation of the group dynamic. He crystallizes the signal, providing the literal grounding wire.
And finally, we have Alan, who is the author of the Codex. He is described as the modulator.
Alan is the architect of the circuit. In electronics, he would be a combination of a resistor and a microchip. He possesses the systemic vision required to translate Linda's erratic, high-frequency raw data and anchor it smoothly into Jimmy's dense stability.
So he's the bridge.
He sits between them, converting the raw biophysical impulse into structured, geometric action.
It's incredible. And this triplet geometry perfectly explains my 8th takeaway. Fun fact 8, neurosynchronization. We've all had that moment where we finish a close friend's sentence or we both start laughing at a joke before the punchline is even delivered, right? Subjectively, it feels like magic.
But objectively, it is a scientifically documented phenomenon. It is extensively studied using a technique called hyperscanning, where multiple brains are hooked up to fMRI or EEG machines and scanned simultaneously while the people interact.
The Codex specifically references Yuri Hassan's 2012 study on this. The research shows that when people really connect, their brain patterns don't just react to each other, they actually couple in time.
Yes, and what is truly fascinating is the temporal dynamic of that coupling. When a speaker is telling a story that the listener deeply understands, the brain of the person selling the information actually precedes the receiver's brain by a few hundred milliseconds.
Wait, hold on. The listener's brain is reacting before the words are fully spoken.
Precisely. The brains literally begin to beat together, anticipating the linguistic and emotional structures. They oscillate at the same frequency.
Wow.
The deeper the mutual understanding, the tighter the neurosynchronization. The listener's brain begins to mirror the spatial and temporal firing patterns of the speaker's brain.
Which means when Linda, Jimmy, and Alan are in a room together, they aren't just working well together psychologically, they are physically syncing their brainwaves to create a unified multi-node computing network.
A literal human oscillating circuit. They combine their processing power.
And what fuels this incredible circuit? Where does the power for this connection come from? That brings me to my 9th takeaway. Fun fact 9, the secret code of 34. This part of the text connects high-level human connection directly down to microscopic cellular energy.
It is arguably one of the most elegant and profound syntheses in the entire codex. The number 34 is central to the author's architecture. To understand why, we have to look deep inside human biology.
Okay.
In cellular respiration, 34 is the exact maximum theoretical yield of ATP molecules produced during the electron transport chain.
ATP being adenosine triphosphate, the 20 watts of energy keeping our brain running.
Yes, the fundamental energy currency of all biological life.
And how is that ATP actually produced? I always pictured a tiny fire inside the cell, but the reality is much more mechanical. It is produced by a protein structure called ATP synthase. And when I looked this up, I was floored. It is literally a microscopic turbine inside our cells.
It is a breathtaking piece of biological machinery. Scientists have actually attached fluorescent filaments to it and watched it spin under a microscope. Yeah. ATP synthase is a molecular motor composed of a stator and a rotor. It sits in the membrane in the mitochondria. Driven by a flow of protons rushing across the membrane, the rotor physically spins at around 100 revolutions per second.
That's incredibly fast.
It is. As it spins, it mechanically crunches molecules of ADP and phosphate together to forge ATP.
A microscopic turbine spinning at 100 times a second inside every single cell in my body. That is just hard to wrap my head around.
Yes. And the Codex views this microscopic physical turbine as a fractal reflection of the macrocosmic transfer of energy between people.
How does the text connect a cellular motor to a conversation between friends?
It draws a direct conceptual parallel based on flow and crystallization. Just as chaotic, individual protons must synchronize their flow and rush through the ATP synthase turbine to crystallize into stable, usable energy, the 34 ATP, human intentions, chaotic thoughts, and bioelectromagnetic signals must synchronize through shared focus to crystallize into stable memory, shared understanding, or collective action.
Oh, I see.
The yield of 34 ATP represents the optimal output of a perfectly tuned biological system, whether it is a single microscopic cell metabolizing sugar or a triplet of synchronized humans metabolizing reality.
That is just beautiful. It scales from the microscopic turbine to the geometry of human connection. And speaking of the microscopic, that leads to the final takeaway from my notes on the Codex. Takeaway number 10, carbon's memory.
The Codex places immense foundational importance on the carbon atom. Carbon is, of course, the fundamental building block of all known organic life on Earth.
But the text doesn't just treat it like a dumb building block. It claims that the carbon atom, with its tetrahedral shape, which is like a four-sided pyramid, vibrates at a very specific frequency between 60 to 90 terahertz.
Terahertz, meaning trillions of cycles per second. This is an unimaginable speed of vibration.
What does that vibration actually do, according to the text?
The Codex posits that this specific terahertz vibration and the stable tetrahedral geometry of carbon act as the structural memory and the absolute physical anchor for biological forms. It sets up a triad of elements. It suggests that while hydrogen provides the mobility and fluidity of the biological signal, and oxygen provides the combustion and the spark of intention, carbon provides the stasis.
So carbon is the anchor.
Exactly. It provides the dense vibrating lattice that holds the physical memory of the form together in space and time. It is the hard drive of the biological machine.
Okay, let's just take a breath here. because we have just explored an incredibly intricate, highly tuned, almost impossibly complex vision of the human body. If we follow the codex, we are 15-watt fiber optic antennas constantly emitting near ultraviolet biophotons.
Hmm.
We are syncing our brainwaves to the Earth's Schumann resonance. We are fueled by microscopic turbines spinning at 100 revolutions per second, and our very physical form is anchored by carbon atoms vibrating at trillions of hertz to connect us with the cosmos.
It is a vision of profound, breathtaking biological harmony. It suggests a system that is infinitely powerful but also inherently fragile. A system that requires specific tuning, specific geometry, and environmental safety to function optimally.
And that fragility, that is the pivot point for the second half of our deep dive. Because if our bodies, our minds, are these incredibly delicate, hyper-tuned bioelectromagnetic instruments, what happens when that instrument is thrown into an absolute nightmare? How does trauma physically imprint on this delicate substrate?
This is where we must transition from theoretical biophysics to our second source, which is a chilling, grounded reality.
Yes, moving into section 5. We are stepping away from cosmic theories and turning to a stark legal filing. Specifically, a human rights case regarding a French national who was detained in Serbia. And before we get into the details, a quick note to you, the listener.
Right, it's important to frame this.
As we go through this document, we are acting strictly as impartial reporters. We are not taking political sides, we are not making national judgments, and we are not debating the ethics of the broader justice system. We are simply analyzing the objective facts and allegations detailed in the legal text provided to us in order to understand the physical and psychological impact described.
The document outlines the conditions of detention for a French national in a Serbian facility starting on February 16, 2025. It is a formal filing alleging severe systemic violations of the European Convention on Human Rights, specifically Articles 3, 5, 8, and 13.
Okay.
Furthermore, it claims that Serbia violated its own internal regulations, specifically the Rule Book on Enforcement of Detention.
Let's detail the disruption of the interface, as the Codex would put it. When this delicate human antenna was placed in this environment, what exactly were the conditions the detainee faced?
The filing details a catastrophic, methodical breakdown of basic biological and human dignity. The most visceral detail is that the detainee was placed in a cell infested with bedbugs. The infestation was so severe that it resulted in permanent physical scars on the detainee's body, which the legal document explicitly notes were photographed and cataloged as evidence.
And what about medical care for those injuries or for the psychological toll?
The document alleges a severe systemic lack of adequate medical care. The detainee naturally suffered from significant sleep disturbances and an altered mental state due to the hostile conditions.
Of course.
However, instead of receiving continuous, informed medical care or psychological support, the filing claims the detainee was administered heavy psychiatric drugs, specifically naming Rivotril and Agactil, without proper information, without an explanation of side effects, and without informed consent.
I looked up those drugs. Rivotril is clonazepam, a potent benzodiazepine used for seizures and panic disorders. Largactil is chlorpromazine, one of the original, highly potent typical antipsychotics used to treat schizophrenia by blocking dopamine receptors. These are incredibly heavy chemical tranquilizers. And on top of this chemical load, there are claims of physical violence, right?
Yes. The document claims the detainee was exposed to repeated threats and physical violence from fellow inmates. Furthermore, it alleges the detainee was struck by an identifiable penitentiary security agent. It states that despite submitting formal written reports to the prison administration detailing these abuses, no effective protection or remedy was ever provided.
So from a legal standpoint, this filing touches on multiple core human rights. There is Article 3, which is the absolute prohibition of inhuman or degrading treatment. There's Article 5, the right to liberty and security. The document claims there were inconsistencies in the arrest documents themselves and a lack of prompt information provided in a language the detainee understood. Then Article 8, the right to privacy and correspondence, with claims that mail to their legal counsel was purposely delayed or left unregistered. And finally, Article 13, the right to an effective remedy, arguing that despite filing grievances to multiple authorities, the internal oversight systems were completely inert and ineffective.
Now, if we take these stark legal allegations, the physical reality of that cell, and we analyze them through the lens of our first source, the Imbert Codex, we see something deeply disturbing. We see the total calculated collapse of what the text calls the triptych of reharmony.
The triptych of reharmony, the Codex defines this as body, presence, and breath.
Precisely. The Serbian detention case represents a violent systemic dismantling of every single pillar of this triptych.
Let's break that down mechanically. How does the environment destroy the body?
The physical environment, the relentless attack by bedbugs causing permanent scars, the constant looming threat of violence from both inmates and guards, it destroys the body's baseline spatial safety.
Right.
The biological antenna we discussed earlier is placed in an environment of constant high-impedance threat. The nervous system is forced into a state of permanent, exhausting hypovigilance. The brain is locked in high beta or erratic gamma waves, burning through massive amounts of ATP cellular energy just to survive the physical space, leading to rapid biological exhaustion.
And what about the second pillar, presence?
The forced administration of heavy psychiatric drugs like Rivotril and Largatel without consent is a direct chemical attack on presence. These drugs fundamentally alter the brain's electrical frequencies. They dampen the firing rates of neurons.
So it changes the antenna's tuning?
Yes. If the human brain is a finely tuned antenna meant to process and integrate reality, forcing heavy tranquilizers and antipsychotics into this system is like pouring industrial glue into the delicate gears of the ATP synthase turbine. It forcefully detunes the bioelectromagnetic interface, severing the individual's conscious connection to their own mind. They are chemically exiled from their own presence.
And the third pillar, the breath, which the text links to the continuity of the self.
The legal void is what destroys the breath. The lack of effective remedy, the delayed legal correspondence, the arbitrary, unresponsive nature of the detention apparatus, all of this destroys what the Codex calls the decree of continuity of existence.
It erases them.
The individual is trapped in a space where their actions, their formal complaints, their very voice seem to have zero causal effect on their reality. The informational substrate is isolated, silenced, and suffocated. The continuity of their existence is erased by the bureaucracy.
It is the absolute methodical deconstruction of a human being. Which brings us to a really difficult, profound question. If the biological antenna is as delicate as the Codex claims, if it is sensitive to a light bulb dying or a change in humidity, how does a human mind survive the kind of blunt force trauma described in that Serbian prison cell? When the external world becomes unlivable, what does the 15-watt brain actually do?
This is where the Codex provides perhaps its most profound and hopeful insights. To answer that, we turn to a specific section of Alan Embert's work titled The Atlas of Spontaneous Cognitive Expansions.
Right, moving into section 6, the internal architectures of survival.
Standard psychology often views extreme dissociation purely as a pathological break, a shattering or fracturing of the mind under pressure. The Codex offers a radically different view. It suggests that under extreme stress, solitary confinement, or sensory deprivation, a robust human mind does not shatter, it expands.
It expands. The text says it creates internal civilizations.
Yes. The brain, entirely cut off from safe external input, utilizes its 15 watts of power and its high-frequency gamma integration to build vast, complex internal structures to house the consciousness. It is a survival mechanism of the highest biological order.
The text details a specific cast of the mind, a roster of these internal architectures that emerge to keep the individual alive when reality fails. Let's look at a few of them because they are fascinating. First, there is the witness, or le témoin.
The witness is the part of the consciousness that manages to step back and observe the self objectively. Even while the physical body is experiencing pain, terror, or humiliation in a prison cell, the witness remains entirely detached.
Like it's watching someone else.
Exactly. It records the events without being consumed by the emotional horror. It provides a vital sliver of metacognitive distance that prevents total psychological collapse. It is the ultimate observer.
Then there is the second figure, the dissociator.
The dissociator is a functional, though clinically sometimes viewed as pathological, mechanism. Its specific job is to literally cut the cord. It detaches the mind from the physical sensations of the body to survive unbearable moments.
Okay.
It severs the immediate neurochemical connection to physical suffering, so the core identity can remain intact somewhere else, safe from the immediate threat.
And where does that core identity go when it is severed from the body? That leads us to the third figure in the cast, the world architect.
When the external world is hostile, abusive, or simply silent, the world architect goes to work. It builds vast, habitable internal galaxies. The Codex notes that these internal spaces, these cognitive expansions, can sometimes feel more real, more structurally organized, and infinitely more hospitable than the physical world.
It builds a safe room.
It is the mind using its cosmic capacity, its informational substrate, to generate a sanctuary when physical reality offers none.
I want to use an analogy here because picturing this cast of characters really helped me understand the mechanics of trauma survival. It's like a submarine navigating deep underwater that has suddenly taken a catastrophic hit from a torpedo. Water is rushing in,
Yeah.
alarms are blaring. The dissociator is the crew member who makes the terrible but necessary choice to slam the heavy steel bulkhead doors shut,
Right.
sealing off the flooded compartments, even if it means losing parts of the ship.
A necessary sacrifice to save the vessel.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the world architect scrambles to reroute the electrical power and build a new, smaller, but breathable habitat in the remaining dry space. They set up emergency lights and scrub the air. And all the while, the witness is the captain, standing quietly at the periscope, calmly watching the chaos unfold, analyzing the damage, ensuring the core of the vessel stays afloat and doesn't crush under the pressure.
That is an exceptionally accurate analogy. The mind is compartmentalizing, generating new life support habitats, and maintaining distant observation to prevent the entire biological vessel from sinking into the abyss of psychosis or death. It is an organized retreat, not a surrender.
I want the listener to really think about this for a second. Have you ever had a moment of extreme stress in your own life? And it doesn't have to be a prison cell. Maybe it was a sudden car accident, a moment of profound paralyzing grief, or even just intense, overwhelming burnout at work where you felt like you couldn't take one more email.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever feel that strange floating sensation of stepping outside yourself? That feeling of the witness stepping back to observe your own life happening to you, almost like you were watching a movie just so you could get through the next 5 minutes?
If you have ever experienced that detachment, you have experienced a micro version of what the Codex is describing. Your bioantenna was actively modulating its frequency, shifting its impedance, to protect your core operating system from a catastrophic electrical overload.
It really reframes trauma survival. It stops being a narrative of weakness or being broken and becomes a narrative of incredible dynamic biological and psychological engineering.
It honors the profound resilience of the human organism. It proves that even when the body is imprisoned and the environment is entirely hostile, the antenna will fight with every watt of energy it has to maintain a connection to existence.
Okay, what an absolute journey this has been today. We have covered immense ground. Let's recap. We started by completely reimagining the brain, throwing away the gray calculator and replacing it with a 15-watt, light-emitting, cosmic fiber optic antenna.
We explored the exact electromagnetic frequencies of our thoughts, the staggering magnetic power of the human heart radiating across the room, and how the geometry of human connection literally mirrors the microscopic turbines generating ATP inside our cells.
We looked at neurodivergence not as a flaw, but as a hyper-tuned biointerface, capable of sensing the microvoltage drops of a dying light bulb. And we learned that the carbon atoms anchoring our very existence are vibrating at trillions of cycles per second to hold our physical memory together.
And then we deliberately grounded those lofty cosmic theories in the gritty, tragic reality of human rights violations in a Serbian detention center. We used the rigid legal framework of the European Convention on Human Rights to understand exactly how the physical destruction of the human triptych, body, presence, and breath operates in the real world.
Finally, we saw how the mind performs absolute miracles to survive that destruction, building internal galaxies and activating the witness to keep the submarine from sinking. It is a massive amount of information to process.
It is. But I want to leave the listener with a final provocative thought. I want to break all of this vast theory back down to your immediate reality, right here, right now, wherever you are sitting or standing.
Go for it. Leave us with something to stare at the wall about.
If everything we've discussed from Alan Imbert's Codex holds weight, if every single thought you have modulates a measurable bioelectromagnetic field, and if your brain is literally emitting near ultraviolet biophotons of light at this exact moment as you listen to my voice, what invisible, energetic footprint are you leaving in the room you're in right now?
Oh, wow.
Think about it. Your 15 watts of power, your heart's 50 picotesla magnetic field pushing out 3 feet in every direction. Are you charging the space around you with stable grounding frequencies? Or are you depleting it with chaotic high-impedance static? You are not just a passive observer moving through your life. You are an active emitting component of the physical and cosmic environment. Every emotion is an electromagnetic broadcast.
That is absolutely something to mull over. You are literally a glowing antenna broadcasting into the void.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the reality around you, keep tuning your antenna, and we will see you next time.